Welcome back to the Candy Corn Quilt Shop Quilt Along. We are on week 2, September 8th. Today we're going to make 4 blocks, MT bobbins, alma scraps, rust in pieces, and broom parking. I have everything prepped. You can see that in video number 1, so all my fabrics are pulled and prepped. I did need to use this guide. This is the quilting guide. If you're using the background quilting bundle, this tells you all the quilting for each block, which file, which size. As I go through and work on these blocks, I'll read it off to you. There's also a kind of what I would call a little bit vague thread chart in here. It just gives the name of the colors. I've started pulling my threads. I'll be going through my threads as I go. If you like the fabric rope bowl, I'll link that below. I have a video on how to make that. These threads up here are all glow-in-the-dark thread. They are by Sim Thread. They have a couple different glow-in-the-dark threads. I just used this one on a different project, and I've had these on my thread wall for 4 years and they still glow in the dark. I didn't find colors listed for background quilting. I did just go through and do a brief glance. I found that the instructions for this are a little bit different than their newer quilts. You have to refer back to things like this guide to find the quilting rather than have it being in each individual step. You will need black thread. And these are the colors that I'm using. A white thread. I don't have a lot of Glide. I have Floriani and this Sim thread. It says dark orange. I picked this orange. I like it better. And then it calls for a light gray. I picked this kind of silvery color because it matches the fabric that I'm using. All the blocks that we're going to do today will fit in this 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. I can actually fit 4, or you can do them individually in a 5 by 7 hoop, or if you have something that fits 2 at a time, you can do that. Personal choice. I'm going to go ahead and show you how I fit 4 blocks in this hoop. I have my light mesh cutaway stabilizer loaded. I'll show this right now for the first video, and then going forward I'll skip this step. But in case you're new, I used the 20 by 10 light mesh cutaway with this size hoop. And to make it fit, it doesn't fit this way. It's too short. It has to fit this way. Here's the end of the tube. And then I end up with extra. So what I like to do is I put a little bit here, enough for me to pull it and tighten it. And then there's more over here. Then when I'm done and cut my project out of the hoop, I have extra stabilizer that I can use for smaller projects, like with a 5 by 7 or 4 by 4 hoop. Before I put this on my machine, I will go ahead and roll it up and pin it so it doesn't accidentally slip underneath my hoop. I'm using the regular hoop that comes with the machine, so I hand tighten, I screwdriver tighten. Let's head over to the machine and load our files. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. My files are on USB. I've got my list here so I know what I'm doing. Let's bring these up. We're going to start with the MT bobbins. I have a folder on my USB for Candy Corn Quilt Shop. We'll start with MT bobbins, and I want to load the background quilting. I have my quilting file loaded. This is called KDQ 007 Chevron 1 4 by 6 horizontal. I'm going to drop that in and hit set. I'm going to drag it all the way up to the top corner, and I'm going to hit add. We're going to add our background quilting for alma scraps next. The reason I'm adding the quilting first is because I want to do all the background quilting and then all the applique. Alma scraps. And the quilting for this one is called KDQ 036 Celebration 2 4 by 6 vertical. I'm going to add that one. We'll hit set. Move that to the top. Let's add for rust in pieces. And the quilting for this one is KDQ 013 Halloween 1 4 by 6. I'm going to put that in the bottom corner. And we'll add broom parking. The quilting for broom parking is KDQ 032 Wavy 3 4 by 6 horizontal. I've got all the background quilting added, so when we stitch, all of this should stitch first before the applique. That's why I added these first. Now, when you're doing this, just be careful as you add your embroidery, you put it on the right quilting file. But honestly, if you completely mix them up, it's still going to look good. Let's find the MT bobbins file. You can see it dumps it in the middle. I need to get it centered. You just kind of drag and drop. That to me looks good. Let's go to the next one. We need alma scraps. And that goes over the little pennants. Now if I do these one at a time, 5 by 7, the machine will center everything for me and I don't have to worry about it. That looks pretty good. Might be, I'm looking at the top, might be a little high. Let's look. If I even out the bottom, now I've got the bottoms matching and the tops matching. That looks good. Let's go to the next one. We need the rest in pieces file. That's going to go on top of the spider webs. That looks good. And we'll add the broom parking file. That looks good. I'm going to go ahead and save this to my machine. That way, in case anything happens, it's on my machine. I'm going to hit embroidery. It's going to start here with the background quilting and do this block, then this block, then this, but it's going to do all the quilting first. The first square is going to be my batting placement, and then I'll have a batting tack down, fabric placement, fabric tack down, and quilting. So we'll walk through that. Then we're going to do the same thing for this one, and this one. And then once all the fabrics are placed and the background quilting is done, we'll start the applique. I have a neutral thread on my machine. We're going to stitch the batting placement line for the MT bobbins block. I have my batting ready. I talked about sizing batting in video 1. If you didn't see video 1, to get the size of the batting that you need, look at the final cut size for the block. So let's say it was 4 by 4, then you would cut your batting 5 by 5. I just add an inch. It's really easy. That looks good. Let's stitch the tack down. Once the tack down is stitched, you want to trim the extra batting that's outside of the stitch line. I have my batting trimmed. I'm going to stitch the fabric placement line. You're going to place your fabric, make sure it covers that placement line. And this is the fabric I picked. This is an older quilt. There are no fabric kits left, at least not that I could find. So I pulled from my stash. I talked about that in the first video. Since I have a light colored fabric, I'm going to look on the back, look for any dog hairs. We've got 2 black dogs, 1 white dog, chinchilla hair, anything like that. If you've got cats, check for cat hair, stray threads, especially if you're using a light colored fabric. Instead of centering, I'm going to go ahead and slide it over for 2 reasons. I've got a couple spiders here. I want to see if I can get them both on the block. I can by sliding it over, although I think this one's going to get covered by applique, so I'm going to pull it down and maybe, nope, that's going to get covered. So that orange one's going to get covered no matter what. So we'll just go ahead and focus on seeing if I can keep this black one. That looks good. You can tape this in place if you want. I'm going to go ahead and stitch the fabric tack down. I'm still using my neutral thread. When I go to do the quilting, I'm going to change my thread color. The background quilting for this block is the chevron. I'm going to use my white glow-in-the-dark thread for my background quilting. The background quilting is done. My machine's ready to stitch the next batting placement line. You do not trim this block at this time. We'll trim these at the end. I'm going to switch back to my neutral thread. We'll go through all the same steps, and then I'll slow down again and show you which thread I picked for the quilting. Here's my batting placement line. One thing I noticed is it's right next to this piece of fabric here. When I go to stitch the fabric placement line, if I don't trim some of this out of the way, this is going to get caught. So I'm going to take a minute and trim some of this to get it out of the way to make sure everything will fit in my hoop. Here's what I trimmed off. I just needed a little more extra space. Now I'm ready to go ahead and place my batting and do my batting tack down line. For this block, I'm going to use the green glow-in-the-dark for my background quilting. The background quilting is all done on all my scraps. Now we're going to work on the rest in pieces. I have my neutral thread back on my machine. We're going to go through the same steps, and I'll stop again and show you what I picked for my quilting. The background quilting for this block is cobwebs. I'm going to use my gray glow-in-the-dark thread I don't have a purple. I think they make a purple, but I don't have one. But since it's cobwebs, I think the gray will look good. That stitched out beautifully. It's kind of a shame we're going to have a big piece of applique over that. It looks like a little bit of the spider is going to be visible here and a little bit of this guy here. Let's move on to broom parking. I've got my neutral thread back on the machine. I'm going to go through the same steps, and I'll slow down again when we get to the quilting. I'm going to switch to the white glow-in-the-dark thread for the quilting on this. This is the last bit of background quilting, then we'll start on our applique. All 4 blocks are done for the background quilting. We're going to start with the MT bobbins block. The first thing we're going to do is stitch our placement line for the tombstone fabric. It says to choose a neutral thread color. I'm going to go ahead and use my silver light gray color since we're going to be doing the applique and stitching it down, and it matches the fabric, and there's going to be an outline stitch with this color. It'll be easier for me to see on the white versus neutral. Honestly, it's still a bit hard to see. I can see the top right here. I've got this gray fabric. I'm going to check the back, make sure there's no stray threads or anything. There's a little something right there. I think it's between the fabric and the fusible. I do that all the time, even though I try to be careful, but it's going to get cut off right there, and then it looks like right here. So I'll make sure those are outside. Yep, they're both outside the areas. They're going to be cut off. I'm going to put my tape down, and then we're going to stitch the tack down line. You can see here, it's probably really hard to see, but here's the placement line. And then when I put my fabric down, sometime between then and the tack down, I bumped. Here's the tack down, so it shifted about a ½ an inch that way. I had to pick it all out, so I picked it out. Here's the fabric. You'd never know, unless you look really, really close. I can kind of see it. What I do if I have to pick things out, carefully pick it out, and then I usually take my fingernail and I'll kind of go up and down, side to side, and try and erase the holes the best I can. Then I spray it with water and I iron it, and the holes pretty much completely disappear. Oh, you can see some of the thread here on the back. Now I have to start over and get to the point that I need to make sure it's centered. Remember at the beginning when I saved it to my machine? That's why I save it to my machine, so it'll be in the same place that I had it as before. So let's do that together. That way if you bump your machine, you know what to do. I turned my machine off and I let it stay off for a little bit while I took care of my fabric. We're going to go back to our files. I saved it on the machine. It's this one right up here. Let's go ahead and select that and hit set and embroidery. Now I need to make sure it's in the correct spot. It should be right in the center of my hoop. Let's go have a look. That looks to be right in the center. Now I need to advance and check to make sure that it stays lined up. The easiest way for me to advance this and keep track of where I am, use the plus minus right here, and I'm going to advance by thread. So that's going to advance it through each step. You can see right now it's at the batting placement. Now it's at the tack down, fabric placement, fabric tack down, quilting. Now we need to go all the way to get to the applique. So I'm just going to continue advancing, and my hoop moves with each step. So I don't advance it too quickly. I give my machine a chance to move the hoop and then to come to a stop. Now I'm at the placement line for that fabric. You see the little crosshair right there. Let me zoom in. The crosshair is right there. I'm going to go over to my machine and hand crank my needle down and make sure that's where it is. It should be right at the corner. So it's exactly where it needs to be. So here we are at the start. I'm going to hit the plus 100 and advance it 100 stitches. It's on the side over here. I'm going to hand crank my needle down. That looks good. It looks like it's where it needs to be. I'm going to go forward a little bit less. Let's go by tens. going to go to the very top. Let's hand crank down. Spot on. It's hitting right where it needs to be. So I know my placement line is tracing right over the placement line I had before. Now I can advance to the tack down. Here's where I am right now. The little crosshairs are right here on the placement line. I'm going to advance my thread. Now I'm ready for the tack down. I'm going to place my fabric again and tack this down. Let's place our fabric. Make sure you're covering your placement line, and we'll do the tack down. Let's have a look at this just for fun. So if I fold this side up, I've got about a finger's width between the edge and the outside of the quilt block. And let's fold this one up. Finger's width, that's perfect. I can still see right here was where the stitching went after I bumped the machine. But now we're all centered, it's good to go. It says not to trim at this time, so I'm not going to trim it yet. We want to switch, put our black thread on our machine, and stitch the inscription details. That's the words. Once this is stitched out, it tells you it's okay to trim your fabric. I'm not sure why it didn't want you to trim it before you did this step. So you need to trim the extra gray that's outside of that stitch line, and then you want to put on light gray per the instructions, or whatever color you're using. I'm using a light gray, kind of silver, and then we'll stitch the satin outline. Check your bobbin. Now's the perfect time. We've been doing a lot of stitching. You probably do need to switch it out. I thought I'd show this. I changed out my bobbin, I put my new thread on, and I threaded my machine, and I'm going to put my hoop back on. It's not going to fit. There's something weird going on. I've never had this happen before. I did not bump my machine this time, but this is clearly too far over. I can't get my hoop on. So I'm going to need to go back through the steps I did before and make sure I'm all lined up before I do the satin stitching. I'm all lined up and ready to go. I'm going to do my satin stitching. The first one has stitched out. I'm looking at it. It looks good. I kind of wish I would have picked a darker gray for the outside, but I think once it's in the quilt, it'll look nice. We're going to move on and do almost scraps and then the rest in pieces. They're done in the same way. I'll just go ahead and set them to music. I'm hoping I don't have any more weird movement with the machine. I'm going to go ahead and start on almost scraps. Almost scraps block is done. No issues with that. Going to stitch out the rest in pieces, and then we'll work on broom parking together. We're going to start with broom parking. It has us stitching the placement line and the tack down line in a neutral color. This is going to be my background for the sign. After we do the placement and then place the fabric and tack it down and trim it, we're going to be stitching the words in white. So neutral color, I'm going to put on the white because we're going to need that next. I've got my white thread on the machine. Let's make sure we thread the needle. There we go. Let's stitch our placement line. You want to cover your placement line with your sign fabric. I'm using this solid purple. Again, I'm not working with the fabric kit. That's no longer available. I'm going to go ahead and slide that back on. We'll stitch the tack down, and after it tacks down, it says don't trim and to stitch the words. That'll all be done in white. Once all the words have stitched out, that was a long one, trim the fabric that's outside that stitch line, and you're going to put on your orange. They call it dark orange. I'm using this orange, and we're going to do the satin stitching around the sign, and that's the last step on our machine today. We are done. There's a couple little jump threads on some of these. I've been trying to trim them as I go, but if you've got any jump threads, you can trim them up. We're going to take this over to the cutting table and trim all our blocks, and then I'll show you what I picked for my fabrics for next week. We're over at the cutting table. The first thing I want to do is take this out of the hoop. I need to start by cutting off my extra stabilizer. I've got this nice big piece here that I'll be able to use for other projects. I'm going to trim that off, trim off the extra, and then I'm going to get in here and separate my blocks. All of these blocks are going to trim to the same size, 4.5 by 6.5. I'll show you how to use the orange pop rulers in case you've never done that before. I'm using 2 of the rectangle. There's another big one as well. I'll link these below. You can get these at Kimberbell. You want to center your block inside, and this is the 4.5 by 6.5. You're looking for that fabric tack down line. That's how you center your block. Line it up right along that line. That looks good. And then I'm going to take the next size up and put it outside that. It just helps me have a little more space for my hand to hold the ruler straight when I'm cutting. Once you've got your ruler where you want it, watch out for this hand. We're going to be cutting on this side, on the left side. And you cut from notch to notch. So don't put your hand like this, because you're going to cut all the way up to the top. Once you've got everything in place, go ahead and grab your cutter. And you're going to put it in this notch here as far to your left as possible. You'll see it has some wiggle room, so when you put it here, not to the right, all the way to the left, push all the way over. We're going to cut all the way up until the next notch. You can see my hand still got in the way there. Turn, hold it in place. You can also put a weight on this side. Sometimes I throw a bottle of water here or something to hold that down so it doesn't shift. All the way over to the left. Cut. Rotating cutting mat really helps. I'll link this one below. And the bottom. Let's have a look. Looks pretty good. In theory, this should be completely centered, but if you remember, I eyeballed it when I loaded it onto my machine. I've got 1/2 inch from edge to edge there, and just like 1 thread less than 1/2 inch. I'm good with that. It is almost completely, totally, perfectly centered. Here is our first block. We need to trim all the rest of the blocks the same way. I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll set that to music, and then we'll go through supplies and everything for next week. Here's a quick look at all of our blocks. They're all trimmed. You can put them back in their bag. That way you keep them organized and clean for next time. Let's look at what we need to do to be ready for next week. The week of the 15th, we're going to stitch out boo hoop, home hoop, eek hoop, and fabric shelves. Let's go through our prep for those blocks. On page 4 of your instructions, you'll find the fabrics that you need and the fabric cutting. There's the fabric shelves. It's a black fabric, 5.5 by 10.5. Then the boo, home, and eek hoops, they all have, it looks like a kind of a gray fabric as a background. They're all going to be 4 by 4. Fabric shelves back panel is right here. That's a 4 by 8. There's that fabric. The home hoop background, 6.5 by 6.5. And then you have your boo hoop and your eek hoop, and those are also 6.5 inch square. Let me show you the fabrics that I've picked. I did all of this while these two blocks were stitching out. I thought, well, everything seems to be going well, but I don't want to be far from my machine because it kept bumping. Decided to start pulling everything. Let's go over what I've selected. All of the hoop fabrics for the background, I've picked a light gray. This is for the boo hoop. This is that nice green with the print. They use, I believe it's a green with bats. Yep, they're right here. This is how I decided what to pick. I actually have one matching fabric, and that's the Applique hoop. So I look at the quilt, and then I look at what have I already picked, and then I go through my fabrics and pick something I think will look good. So we've got our boo hoop, all of our hoop fabrics. Here's the measurements. You can double check them against the instructions. I just went through them. Your batting for the hoop blocks, you want to cut 5.5 inch square because we trim these blocks to 4.5 inch square finished. So I've got that one. I even cut my batting, and I put fusible on everything while those two were stitching out. You could easily get ready for next week while those last two blocks are stitching. The home hoop, same fabric for the hoop. I picked the purple with bats. They have a black, I think it's a black print. I thought I'd use this nice purple instead. The Applique hoop, I have the matching fabric for that. This is the background. The hoop fabric is the same, it's the light gray. The fabric shelf block is going to have some embellishments with it. I'm going to do those at the end when we do our embellishments because it's going to have these little fabric bolts. And I don't want to cut the fabric scraps until we're done. Since I'm already working with oddball cuts of fabric from my fabric stash, I don't want to cut those right now. So we'll do those with the embellishments. I picked this fabric for my background. I did find this still at Fat Quarter Shop. I'll link that below. It's a Lori Holt Riley Blake fabric. For the fabric shelves, I picked black. And then for the background, I went ahead and I picked a yellow. And I picked that because we are going to be covering most of it up with these little bolts of fabric, but I thought it might be nice to see a peak of yellow behind that and kind of brighten up this corner of the quilt. Here's the measurement for the fabric shelf fabric. I cut my batting at 7.5 by 11.5 because we have a final trim size of 6.5 by 10.5. Feel free to double check that against the fabric cutting guide. I would always double check. I went ahead and pulled out the quilting guide. If you're using the quilting bundle, we're going to need right here for the fabric shelves number 17. And then for all the hoops, they're number 25, 26, 27. They're right here. And I will go over those again as we're stitching them out next week. We are all done for this week. We've done our first 4 blocks. I think I went through 3.5 bobbins. There's a lot of stitching in these. You can have something else to work on as these are stitching out. I'm going to put all of these back in their bags, keep them clean and organized for next time. Make sure you come back on September 15th. We'll do those hoop blocks and the fabric shelves. You can download this schedule for free. I have it on my website. It'll be linked below. Thank you so much for stitching along with me. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends. I'll see you next time.